Hello, I'm Cynthia Rabinowitz, back with the second segment about wetlands. Defining wetlands has proved to be complicated. All over the world, people have been looking for ways to define what exactly a wetland is. In the United States, we have federal and state definitions. In 1967, Connecticut enacted a state Clean Water Act, which paved the way for the Connecticut Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Act, one of the first in the nation. This came into being in 1972, so we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of our state's Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Act. The Federal Clean Water Act was enacted in 1972, 5 years after Connecticut had adopted such a law. And the Federal Clean Water Act laid the groundwork for a federal wetlands definition and a system of identification. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Agency and the Army Corps of Engineers administered those programs. In Connecticut, the state regulates inland wetlands through the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and local inland wetland commissions in each town administer the regulations on a local level. As you can see in this slide, there's an international definition which came from the Ramsar Convention, which took place in 1971. And in that definition, wetlands include all of these different kinds of landscapes. In Connecticut, we can see that the wetland definition is based on soil types. So poorly drained soil, very poorly drained soil, and alluvial soil. Alluvial soil is the material that is carried by floodwaters when rivers and streams overflow their banks and spread out over the land. The sediment that is carried in the water is deposited on the land's surface, and soil over time forms in that material. The Connecticut law also includes watercourses and water bodies as wetlands. So even though in Connecticut we define and identify wetlands on the basis of soil type, if you remember from the last segment, I said that without hydrology, there can be no wetlands. So obviously water is very important for the creation of wetlands. And we can look for water in the landscape to point us towards likely places where wetlands will be found. But it's not the only parameter that shows us where wetlands are. In this slide, we can see the water on the left-hand side. There's an open pond at the top of the slide that's draining out towards the bottom of the picture, creating a watercourse. And the land surrounding that whole area is a wetland. In the picture on the right-hand side, we can't see any open water at all. We're looking at a forested landscape, and there's nothing really that stands out very quickly to say this is a wetland. But by looking at the soils, we would be able to identify whether this area was a wetland or not. And that's because soil chemistry changes when soils are inundated with water for at least 2 weeks during the growing season. Chemical reactions when soil is flooded create visible characteristics in the soil that tell us that water has been there, even if we don't see any water when we're looking. This allows soils to be used reliably to identify wetlands, even during dry summer months. So the soil that we're looking at in this picture has several different colors. It's a very motley looking color scheme there. It's not uniform. We have everything from dark and medium grays to brownish colors and tan and some fairly deep red, rusty colors. These colors originate and develop when the soil is inundated with water, or if the water is fluctuating. So the level of the water is going up and down, creating an alternated aerobic and non-aerobic environment within the soil. Brightly colored soils indicate aerobic conditions and not hydric conditions. So this would be a non-hydric or upland soil, definitely not a wetland soil. Vegetation can also be a good indicator of where wetlands are. And here are just two species that I'm focusing on, sphagnum moss and cinnamon fern. Both of these species can be found in Connecticut wetlands and in many other places also. But there are many types of plant species that indicate that the soil is wetter in one area and not so wet in others. But vegetation is adaptable. So you can't always rely on vegetation to give you a distinct boundary of where the change is between a hydric environment or wetland and an aerobic environment or upland. And that's where soil becomes very useful. Here's a comparison side by side of a hydric soil on the left-hand side, which has a lot more gray in it. And on the right-hand side, the colors are more beige and tan under the topsoil. In Connecticut, many of us are familiar with the coastal wetlands along our Long Island Sound coastline. And these kinds of wetlands are not identified on the basis of soil. They are identified on by the location of salt-tolerant vegetated species. Inland wetlands can vary greatly in character from one place to another. First of all, they can vary in size. They can be very small, little pocket wetlands, or they can be very large. They can be densely vegetated, or they can be quite open. So there's a lot of variability. Wetlands can be inundated with water at certain times of the year, and even have ponded water over their surface at certain times of the year, but then be much drier at other times of the year. Again, this is why we can't always rely on the presence of water to indicate where a wetland is. They must have some water at some time of the year, otherwise a wetland wouldn't be able to develop. This last slide is a former red maple swamp on my own property in Bethlehem. There's a brook draining out of this swamp, which was dammed by beavers in the late 1980s. The water table in the swamp rose because of the damming and killed all the red maples, which subsequently toppled and rotted into the swamp soils. You can still see a few remaining stumps there. After a few years, the beavers left and the beaver dam collapsed. And now, decades later, maple trees are starting to sprout again. And I'm hopeful that in time, the whole area might revert to a forested swamp as it used to be. Well, thank you very much for listening. This is the end of the second segment. I look forward to talking to you again about inland wetlands.